Good morning, and welcome to part 4 of our ongoing series, The Escalation Trap, with Professor Robert Pape from the University of Chicago, here on At the Water's Edge. The war with Iran continues, and despite having a brief glimmer of a hope of a ceasefire last week, we are now blockading the Strait of Hormuz with the U.S. Navy. Things are getting crazy, which who thought they could get crazier? But excited to sit down with Professor Robert Pape and get his take on where the conflict is heading next, how close we are to a ground invasion, and what diplomatic solutions may yet still remain. If you've enjoyed these updates and the other content on the channel, please like and subscribe and share an episode with a friend. It really helps get the show out to more people. With that, let's get to our conversation with the professor. Well, good morning, Professor. How are you today?
Good morning, Scott. This is the brightest part of my week.
I appreciate that. We all do. So last week we had this great ceasefire announced, and I came up with all sorts of sassy jokes that I could tell when we started this conversation. And then I woke up the next morning and Israel was bombing Lebanon. The ceasefire was over. But just the quick highlights from the week. Now I'm personally mad because I don't get a chance to tell my bad jokes. Selfishly, that's my problem this morning.
Well,
that's the
way
biggest
this
issue.
is going, Scott, I wouldn't throw those away. We're going through certain cycles, so
I should just document these and the appropriate weeks pull them out. You're right. I'll start cataloging them. So yes, past week, let's see. Ceasefires announced. Trump says the 10-point plan from Iran's reasonable for negotiations. Next day, Israel violates the ceasefire that they said they weren't a part of, even though Pakistan said that they were. We do emergency negotiations in Pakistan. They don't work out. And then Trump's press secretary comes out and says the same 10 points that Trump said were viable basis for negotiation. Trump actually threw in the trash the moment he got them. And last I heard, we're starting a blockade. I believe sometime this morning it officially goes into effect.
It's probably starting right around now.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sure nothing bad is going to happen. So with that said, lots to dig into. Last time, though, you were teasing that one of the results of this conflict is that Iran was becoming a fourth center of world power. It appears the events line up with that. So perhaps we could start there.
Well, why don't we do this, Scott, just so that we start with your big picture, which I think is really where most people are going to cut in. And I can certainly appreciate if they feel confused. So we are in what you are seeing work itself out is the escalation trap. And it's a trap. So just when you think you might take an off ramp, that equals strategic defeat. You can't accept that. So you're right back into escalation. So what you are seeing in the escalation trap, however, is a lot of people are expecting that when you get into political violence or violence of any kind, it's linear. It's all linear. That is, we escalate up rungs. Now, in history, when we go back and write the history of this period, we will probably describe it in that way, just like we do with Vietnam. But the truth is, on a weekly, day-by-day basis, you are getting movement like this in virtually in the Vietnam War and other conflicts as well. Now, there's one additional factor, though, here that was not in Vietnam, which is, so you do have the trap where, in this case, the U.S. is escalating, it's strategically failing, the bad guys counter, we escalate again. But that set of choices now, we're at a fork in the road. The fork in the road that was different than Vietnam, where you could just go home. The fork of the road here is if we just go home, that is America just withdraws its forces, does Cuba, something else, then Iran is going to become a world power. Now, not as strong as the United States or Russia or China, but it will be the fourth center of world power above any other country in terms of global influence, except for those other top three, just to be very clear. And why would that be the case? It's because of their control over the Strait of Hormuz, and also their ability to make progress in developing that nuclear material into actual working weapons. So you put both of those together, and you end up with an emerging oil hegemon in control of 16 plus, because there's a whole lot of stuff besides oil they're in control of too, 20% plus of world oil and other things, that's going to make $100 billion a year minimum. beyond what they were making before. So they're making a whole lot more money. And they will emerge they're on the cusp already of nuclear weapons. There's good reason to think they're just going to speed on into that. And so over the next year, I don't mean 20 years from now, but in the next year, you can see that this would emerge into a fourth center of world power with the ability to dictate that oil flow, which equates to economic production to multiple different countries in the world. That is, they can pick the winners and losers on the global stage in ways that very few other countries can. So Norway can't do that. Not even really the UAE or Saudi Arabia alone could do that. So you end up with a real, now that is if we just simply walk away. That would be the idea. Vance goes, peace talks. We agree. Okay, we're walking away, and that's that path one. So that's fork in the road one. Fork in the road two is that's unacceptable. You can't make those concessions. States, by the way, rarely surrender relative power. So I'm not really expecting the United States will just surrender this, because this would be a downshift for America as Iran goes up. This is a zero-sum game on the global stage. So I'm not really expecting America will just suck it up and do this. But what is the choice? There's only one other choice, and that is escalation. And you saw this with JD Vance's speech. So JD Vance's speech was the most clarifying 3 minutes of political rhetoric since February 28th. Okay. On the morning of February 28th, Donald Trump was clarifying he wanted regime change. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's not true. He never had a moment of clarity, but he didn't have any sense. So we had like a minute from Donald Trump on the morning of February 28th of clarity. Then we've had all this fog machine of what's going on for like 6 weeks now. And then we have JD Vance coming in with another moment of clarity, Scott. And then what he's saying is that he, as the priority, not as like a one of six things, it is Iran has to surrender its enriched nuclear material. And I've been saying to you, I've been saying on my Substack for weeks, even before the first bombs fell, this is the core issue. This is why I modeled the bombing of Iran for 20 years. It's not because they had Ayatollahs. They had that since 1979. It's because they were enriching uranium, which could lead to a bomb. That is the central pillar of this whole thing. JD Vance made this blisteringly clear in his talk, because that's all he talked about. He didn't talk about all these other issues, right? And he said that was the deal breaker, which is we, America, wanted them to surrender the 1,000 pounds, 60% enriched, 10,000, 5 and 20%. And they said no, which is the same position we were on February 27th. It's literally the same place we were. We demanded literally the same goal, even with the war and all the strengthening of Iran. And Iran said no, just like they did before. So literally that, and that, what that told me though, was a couple of things. Number one, it does help when I explain this to the world now that I can, cite JD Vance as credibility. So it gives me a little bit more credibility as I'm explaining what's going on.
You're not just the crazy professor. The Trump administration agrees with you. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but got to be careful with that.
That's not necessarily a good credential to have.
I was going to say, I'll have to be careful. I have to get some PR guy to spin that or whatever. But the other thing that's really important is, up until now, and this may have been why Trump sent Vance, up until now, Vance has been opposed to this the military escalation in this operation. Much like Colin Powell, when Colin Powell gave his famous speech in February 2003 that you're probably a little too young for that, but some of your listeners won't be, and they can go and look it up. When Colin Powell went and gave his speech publicly that said, here is why we believe Iraq has WMD, and that really sealed the deal. We were going to invade Iraq after that. There was no pushback from any quarter. New York Times, Washington, they all bailed on any opposition. And similar is going to happen here. So it's the same basic idea, Scott. You have the biggest opponent inside of the administration. Give it and go and have 21 hours. They gave him his best chance to move Iran. And he came back and he said, I can't move and I'm on board. He effectively said he's on board with the military escalation. No hesitation whatsoever in his voice, no daylight between him and military escalation. Well, so no surprise then, they pull out the card of the naval blockade. Now, what is that going to do? There's only a little trickle of what's actually going through. So you're only blockading this final little bit. But what it means is that now you have both the United States and Iran sealing the 20+% of oil and other energy and other stuff coming in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, which is going to push the world economy now into a deeper, over the real cliff. So this morning, I don't know if you saw this, Scott, but on my Substack, the Escalation Trap, I published a 20-page or a very lengthy article based on my 30 years of studying blockades, economic sanctions, of what the stages of a blockade and its effects on the world and the country really look like. So it's a framework. Again, it's the framework with all the evidence. So a lot of people will be able to follow, and you will see the first 45 days of a blockade, prices go up, but everything kind of continues with just higher prices. That's where we are right now today. This morning is day 45. Then what's going to happen is we go to day between 45 and 60. I didn't say the next 6 months, just the next few weeks. You're going to see actual shortages matter. Some countries are already experiencing those, but this is going to start to become real because it's not just the prices now going up. There's literally shortage and there's no alternative supply. It's not like, we're going to go to solar in the next 2 weeks. We're going to go to nuclear power in the next 2 weeks. No, you're really going to see actual shortages of energy really matter. And you can't take 20% of the world's energy off grid and nothing is going to be short. No, there's going to be a lot of shortages. And then days 60 to 90, what does that look like? Actual contraction. That's where the contraction comes. So it goes price increase, disruption, shortage, contraction. You see, Scott. Now, and then I lay out, what this means for America, for Asia. I go through the whole thing. That is now almost completely sealed. I mean, nothing is ever 100% perfect in this world where we don't have crystal balls. We have risk assessment. But now that the U.S. is doing the military blockade, and even if Iran sinks the ships, I mean, this is just going to seal Hormuz for some time, you see, not just for a day. And so you're going to end up going over this cliff from the, again, price shock, shortage shock, economic contraction shock. That's the real, and that was true with World War I, World War II blockades. That was true. I mean, I'm just telling you, this is one of the things I've studied, the blockade around Japan in World War II. I spent a year and a half studying that problem here in Bombing to Win. That chapter took a long time to write. I didn't just slap that together here, and there was no Google, by the way. You had to actually go to the library for real. So it was, but this is what we're now. So that's just stage one, though, Scott. Because again, back to JD Vance, I've been saying stage one here was the bombing, stage two, the horizontal escalation by Iran lashback, stage three is ground operations. And then now you have the branch where if you don't do it, you have fourth center of world power. Well, the ground operations, Scott, here, JD Vance, I watched that thing several times. I looked for any crease whatsoever to persuade me we were not going to go get that material. Now, of course, we haven't done it. So I'm not saying it's 100%. There is no really, I mean, there's always some gap here. And I think there's still some gaps here that are real. But at the end of the day, here, you listen to JD Vance, I just can't imagine really this war ending without either Iran giving us the material, which I don't think is likely. I don't think this amount of economic pressure is going to work. We can go through all of that history. I mean, I've studied this for 30 years. This is not going to break their back. Very unlikely. We don't have a case in history of that. Again, these are the weight of history that President Trump is up against here. And so what does that mean? That means ground operations. And I'd be surprised if they're not coming. I can't say, certainly in April, but, by middle of May. I mean, I don't think it's going to wait a long time because that will be viewed as the off ramp. The
Yeah.
off ramp now is going to be viewed as, let's go get at least the 60% enriched uranium. That will be our like victory card. We can show off to the whole world. We think 10,000, maybe, a couple weeks. We can talk about all these details. So we're talking ourselves into this mission here, which we've talked ourselves into missions before. Notice we bombed Iran. We talked ourselves into that too, even though that was a bad idea. And so I think this is really where we are, Scott. So it's a long, Professor Pape lecture that I'm known for at the University of Chicago. But this is really the sum total of everything. We are deep in the trap, and we just can't accept strategic defeat here. And that's the trap. That's literally the trap.
Wow. Two things come to mind when you talk about that. One, we have the bombing that started February 27th, but I just think about Iran's offer that was as good as of February 26th, where they were willing to give up all their uranium to prevent us from having this war. And it just seems so silly that we didn't take the offer.
The offers get, every stage they're up in the ante because they're getting better. They're getting in a better catbird seat.
That and I'm just thinking through, okay, so we go in and get this material, just basic logistics. Let's assume that we can go in and get it, which is already an assumption, but let's assume that we're ready to do it.
Assumption for time being.
Yep. I was like, okay, so we have the material. Where does it go? How do you fly it out? Do you put it on a U.S. ship? You have 60% uranium, and what we can assume is
he's going to tell the Russians to fly it out.
Oh, God.
I guarantee what's going to happen, Scott. And you see this in all of his behavior. Anytime there is a cost, his immediate instinct, which by the way is not all bad, to pass the buck. I mean, this is what you would do. It's just he's so obvious about it, nobody will catch the buck, is to find somebody to catch the buck. And so now in the past, when we had the Obama deal, it was the Russians who flew the material out. So under the Obama deal, we had not bombed the enriched uranium. It was there, it was stored, and it was the Russians who took possession of it. And also, by the way, the Russians who handle all the issues with the fuel rods related to the Bashir reactor. So, and this made sense because there were Russian support and scientists and so forth. So there was a technical set of reasons for that, but also politically, it was easier for Iran to hand things over to Russia than anybody else. Now, in this case, here, I find it hard to believe Russia is going to accept it for the same reason we're not going to want to accept it, which is it's going to be leaky. And we're not going to be sure how leaky it is. I suppose it will be possible, we could imagine a scenario, although it's not plausible, where you get all the drums and none of the drums leak. You got the Geiger counters and everything is good. Well, in that case, then the thing you're describing becomes a lot more. And what we do is we put it up in the next Artemis 2 mission. And we send it up. You see, that would be Professor Pape's preferred option here. Let's just send it out of Earth orbit.
And we just leave it on the moon.
Oh, or I would just go past the moon. Why would I hurt the moon?
So my best friend from high school was actually one of the lead electrical engineers for the Orion capsule on the Artemis rocket. Oh. And she would be very, very upset with us if we took nuclear radiation and wrapped it around her pet project from the past several years. So
this is a NIMBY problem, Scott, of the first order, not in my backyard. This is the NIMBY of all NIMBYs.
All right. Well, I'll let Sarah know that you said that, and then she can write you a letter with exactly what she
my
thinks
email's
about
going to blow up. I can see it now.
I'll forward her your contact information. She'll be in touch soon. Yeah. So this is so crazy. It's hard to know where to start, but let's back out and ask a macro question here.
Yeah.
Because we have seen this broader trend that people have talked about of moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world.
Yeah.
You're saying that, okay, we're adding Iran as one of those poles. But I'm looking at the mechanics of how Iran's getting to this point, and obviously this war has pushed us there.
This is great, Scott. But go ahead and explain if you want to, but this, I lecture on this, and I have even before this. So this is exactly where we need to go for your expert listeners. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is, like, if all the mechanics were in place for Iran to play this card, from its missile program to the political relationships to the geography, which is the critical factor here, is this a spot that we would have gotten to inevitably, maybe over the next 50 years, or have we really created something new? Have we accelerated a
Yes.
timeline that was happening anything, or is this a unique novelty that we have created to our own detriment?
We created, Scott, the opportunity for Iran to get away with seizing the Strait of Hormuz, where people are not mad at Iran.
Mhm.
And I mean other countries. India's not, I know, I was on Hong Kong Boom, I'm on all these other channels here, right? And so I'm getting lots of the journalists and they're reflecting their publics. There's nobody really who's mad at Iran here. Not really. They're mad at Trump. They're maybe secondarily mad at Israel. Maybe both of them two together. But what you have in the situation, Scott, is Iran was, of course, always only 20 miles away from the other side of the Strait of Hormuz. But it's like China and Taiwan. If China actually attacks Taiwan, much like when Putin attacked Kyiv and Ukraine for real in February 2022, you're going to get a large part of the world. There'll be some who will be in the middle, but you're going to get a large part of the world to counterbalance. And it's because that act of aggression, which is military use to control something you didn't have control of before, that defines aggression in our world. And it's not a liberal theory of aggression. This is just what defines it. And so that's why, yes, you can have all these tensions, all this bad history, but when an actor, and it doesn't matter which side, an actor takes the step of crossing international border, seizing international waterway, whether it's Putin attacking Kyiv, and literally he was just at the Kyiv airport. You have to understand. And then also, if China would attack Taiwan, you're going to get massive counterbalancing here. And that's the real reason that it's a bad idea to do these unilateral actions. Well, the actor who was doing unilateral, or at most bilateral, if you include Israel, was the United States. So, and that's happened now the second time. So Iran has been being blamed as being the aggressor here. It's just not working here because they didn't start it. they didn't bomb their own Fordo. They don't have B-2s to bomb themselves. I mean, Trump said they had their own Tomahawks to bomb. So they just, that's not true. Okay. And so what you end up with here is the golden opportunity for Iran to gain power, because normally if you gain power, others will be mad at you. Now, this has happened rarely, but it's happened before in history. Up until Iran, the actor who was the state and the statesman who was the best at this was Bismarck in Prussia. So your listeners will be able to go back and study Bismarck. And what he was really good at was suckering countries into attacking him. I mean, into attacking him, his country. And the most famous one is the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. Napoleon III, who's the leader, monarch of France, and France is the top dog, okay, on the continent. And what's happening is Prussia is here, and then there's some other German principalities. Well, Bismarck had this brilliant idea. Napoleon III was basically egotistical. He's sort of like the Trumpy before Trump. And you could kind of play his ego. And that's what happened. He literally talked him into attacking his country in a really stupid plan. Okay. And it was this, and this is how France fell from great power status. It used to be the top dog on the continent. And then after that, no more. And what happened was when it attacked, it couldn't get the quick and decisive victory. So over the course of a few months, all of a sudden German nationalism comes. Those principalities unify. They rise up and they beat France bad. And what happens here? France doesn't just get a bloody nose. It drops in rank. And suddenly there's Germany. Now, you might say, well, Germany goes on to fight World War I. Where's Britain here counterbalancing? That's exactly what Napoleon III said. I might even write a Substack about this because it's exactly what Napoleon III was saying, which is, Britain, come bail me out. Don't you understand you're building he didn't call it the fourth center of world power, but it's literally the same thing, Scott. And what you see is it's that really like rare ability to truly see the opportunity you have in front of you to blame the other side. And if you can win the blame game on the international stage, you can rise to power. And Bismarck wrote it all the way through. And the real problem for the Germans here in World War I was they didn't have Bismarck. Bismarck, I don't think, would ever have started World War I. This was not at all a smart idea here. So, but that's exactly what Iran has done. They've taken the page from Bismarck.
Wow. It's almost funny right there. You're talking about Napoleon III calling for Britain, because I'm remembering Pete Hegseth getting out there and talking about the British Royal Navy and how it needs to come to the Strait of Hormuz. It seems oddly poetic.
Right. It's because they're imagining, well, what don't you understand? You're building a bigger, badder Frankenstein. No, the world is saying, no, you don't understand. As much as we're scared about the fourth center of world power, we're now even more scared of you, the top dog. And that's what they're not understanding. They're just not able to see that America is a Godzilla. And if you have a Godzilla acting like a Frankenstein monster here, that's worse than Bambi acting crazy.
Wow. Do you think this blockade has the ability to bring in other international actors? Because I'm imagining this horrific scenario where somebody tries to run the blockade, like a Chinese ship because they need the energy, or a ship from Africa because they need the fertilizer to prevent a famine. And, we seize the ship, it goes poorly, there's this big bloody episode, and now other nations are coming in to try to degrade our own blockade.
In China, Scott, last June when we bombed Fordo, and I was visiting all the advanced industries in not just Beijing, but Wuhan, Shenzhen, Hangzhou, and I was hanging out with BYD executives. So all of these, Alibaba, all these people, while we're bombing Fordo and talking about all of these issues. And the big thing, and you could see this from like the stats, but it was very, very clear in all these dinners, is China's just not that dependent on Middle Eastern oil the way we keep saying this. We keep saying, oh my God, we've got their throat on their jugular, or hand on their jugular. It's just not true. 80% of China's energy needs is not coming from oil at all. Here. And then if you talk about cutting the Middle Eastern oil, what they were describing to me, and this is what these were the words from these, big shot business people, here is at most maybe 2 or 3% of China's GDP. We can absorb that. That's just not that big of a hit. Whereas for America, they're going to get their butts crushed, and that'll be because very happy. So from their perspective, it's in terms of who's the relative winners and losers here. America gets sucked into the biggest quagmire of all time, maybe bigger than Vietnam here. And they got to pay a little bit of a price here, but they're going to recover from that pretty quick because they're going solar hard. And it's kind of amazing when you go there. We sell solar as like a progressive liberal thing to do. It's about how to become number one. It's a power move. This is like power of the first order going solar. And this is what they were explaining to me.
Wow. Well, I know we're coming up on time, but what should folks be watching over the next week?
Oh, it's going to be really critical as well. You're focusing on the right thing, which is, will the blockade, and the thing I'm going to be looking for, whether it's out of tricks or whatever, is an American ship getting hit. Now, we have kept our ships back about 1,000 miles from the Strait of Hormuz because you now have the Russians giving targeting information, the Chinese giving targeting information, plus some equipment here. So if we're really, really going to, and we just did this thing with these destroyers here, there are 300 sailors on each of those ships. We just need to understand, and you don't have to sink them to cause fires, to cause problems, and death. So I'm really looking to see here if this will be a game of, say, brinksmanship, where we end up getting American military hurt here or killed in this situation. Secondarily, of course, you would look for the ships passing through the straits. But again, my Substack, this long analysis I wrote over last week here, it really is the case that we're heading off of this economic cliff here. And there's very little in the next few weeks you can actually do to stop it. The super tanker is already going over. And so it's really about the military escalation. And then what I'm looking for is not today or this week, but I'm thinking maybe in May, that's when you would actually get if you're going to do something, that's a more propitious time, I think, to get all the acts together, ducks in order, really get ready. You're either going to do Estefan or you're not. I'm thinking May might be a time for that here. And so that's what I'm looking at. And I'll be saying more about indicators in my Substack as we go forward.
Awesome. Well, fingers crossed for a black swan event that makes all this mute and void. But in the meantime, everyone should go subscribe to your Substack. It's been awesome to watch the live briefs and read up on what you're writing. Not sure how you do 20 pages without ChatGPT these days, but it's a lost skill that you still have. Congratulations, sir.
Yep. Well, and also just go look at the old articles on economic sanctions, Scott. You'll see that a lot of what I'm bringing to bear here are from the written materials from three big fat articles on economic sanctions here, and I lecture about this in my classes. So what you're seeing are the frameworks that I'm explaining to the class here, and then adding the little bits of detail here is just not that hard.
Yeah. See, folks, you don't need to pay money to go to University of Chicago. You can just follow the Substack and listen here and get the same education and access to knowledge.
Quite a bit. And that's what, and also this is a real pleasure because a lot of the questions that come in, I'm telling you, Scott, they're just really, really of the top order here. And that helps me a lot because it tells me where I need to deepen and go into a deeper, explanation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate your time. And we'll talk again next week.
Okay, next week, Scott. Talk to you. Bye-bye.